Good morning, everyone. My name is MightyStream, and today is May the 16th. I greet you this morning. I'm brought to you by Hope Through Navigation, and this is the H.O.O.D Recovery Services program. And you can reach me at Hope, Recovery of Hope 21 at gmail.com. Let me repeat that. Recovery of Hope 21 at gmail.com. So I'm a little tongue-tied this morning, but it's all good. We're going to have a beautiful just for today in a meditation reading. Let me begin. Our higher power's will. God's will for us becomes our own true will for ourselves. Basic text, page 48. Let me repeat that because I have quoted this so much. And I just really enjoyed this whole ideal of this quote. God's will for us becomes our own true will for ourselves. Phew, that's beautiful. Okay, the 12 steps are a path to spiritual awakening. This awakening takes the form of a developing relationship with a loving higher power. Each succeeding step strengthens that relationship. As we continue to work the steps, the relationship grows, becoming ever more important in our lives. In the course of working the steps, we make a personal decision to allow a loving higher power to direct us. That guidance is always available. We need only the patience to seek it. Often that guidance manifests itself in the inner wisdom we call our conscience. When we open our hearts wide enough to sense our higher power's guidance, we feel a calm serenity. This peace is the beacon that guides us through our troubled feelings, providing clear direction when our minds are busy and confused. When we seek and follow God's will in our lives, we find the contentment and joy that often elude us when we strike out on our own. Fear or doubt may plague us when we attempt to carry out our higher power's will, but we've learned to trust the moment of clarity. Our greatest happiness lies in following the will of our loving God. Just for today, I will seek to strengthen my relationship with my higher power. I know from experience that knowledge of my higher power's will provides a sense of clarity, direction, and peace. So this particular reading is based on the supposition that you have a higher power, that you have a relationship with your higher power, and that you have at least gotten as far as the third step, where you're turning your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand Him, right? And so with that in mind, if that is not where you're at, that's still okay, because you do understand the acronym for G.O.D is good orderly direction. And so if you're starting at a different point where you don't have a relationship with your higher power, or you're questioning your relationship with a higher power, even a higher power's existence, you still have some basic things that you have in your day-to-day life that you can say are tangible presence of things taking place positively for you that you had absolutely nothing to do with. For instance, today is a shiny day and the sun is shining on believers and agnostics and atheists alike. All of us, all of humanity that are enjoying the sunshine can absolutely say we had absolutely nothing to do with that. However, when it rains, we're also going to benefit from that, right? Something just like breathing. which is an absolute for us to live, is something you have absolutely nothing to do with. So there's something responsible for some of the benefits that you enjoy that we all can say, I had nothing to do with it, but I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that blessing and I'm going to run with it. Right? Okay. So when we're talking about the third step and we're talking about this particular quote, God's will for us becomes our own true will for ourselves. I have learned in my own personal life that when I run ahead into a situation and I haven't taken the time to think about the situation to the point of what can I best bring to this? Am I even supposed to be interacting with this particular situation or person? If I am, how do I go into it in such a way that we both walk away better than the way that we came? The synergy has to be positive, right? It doesn't always appear to be positive because sometimes you're giving counsel to people or constructive criticism or you're parenting or disciplining, right? But when you come into that situation, your intent is for it to be improved, something to be better than it is right now, right? So I think about that. And I also, because I have a higher power, I have a God of my own understanding, I also am humble enough to say in prayer and meditation, in prayer, I'm humble enough to say, what is your will, right? My 11th step, asking only for the knowledge of our higher power's will and the strength to carry that out, the power, the strength to carry that out. So I'm humble enough to be able to do that. Sometimes where I run into an issue is in the meditative part where I'm listening for direction. Sometimes I run into complications with that because I have so many irons in the fire that I'm juggling that, yeah, in general, I know my higher power wants the best for me, but sometimes in a given situation, there's a different stance that I need to take. And a lot of times I'm not faithful to that cause, right? Because I am already in something else and it's just easier to do it this way. But that may not necessarily be God's will for me, for the person I'm interacting with. So I have to learn how to pause. I've just been teaching the boys about halt, not allowing themselves to become too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? So I am learning to pause and make sure that that halt is not somehow in effect, because when I am any of those four things, my decision making, my ability to listen and meditate are all affected, and generally for the negative, right? And so this particular reading is talking about us being able to go along the path towards the 12th step where we're having a spiritual awakening. And we are learning, right? From all the way from the beginning to the end, we're learning that if we use these tools or spiritual principles that we've been endowed with from the 12 steps, then there's something that takes place where I, as a person, am learning that to do anything different is not practical and it's not spiritual for me. To do anything different than the path that I've learned that allows me to admit that I have an issue, believe that I can be restored to sanity, turn my will and my life over to the care of God. If I understand that God, right? To be able to take account or an inventory of my assets and my liabilities so that I can be able to note the patterns that I have in situations and then share that with someone that I trust and also with God so that I'm open to having people give me input. I'm not always so, so caught up in my image. I have a few people on my team that I can turn to and say, hey, what do you think about this? This is what I'm thinking about. This is what I did in the past, and it just didn't always work out so good. What do you think about? And they can easily help me identify my character defects because one, they love me and they care for me, and they're going to give me that input because they love me. They're not going to lie to me. I trust them. They're going to say, you know what? when you get onto something and you're excited about something, you don't even consider the other people around you. This is just what you want to do, and you're going to go for. They'll let you know exactly how your character defects of self-centeredness, pride, or fear, whatever it is, how it is playing out. And they're willing to give that information, knowing that one, you want it, and two, that you're not going to just hate them for telling you the truth about yourself. Right. And then past that, I'm now able to say, I'm entirely ready for this to be removed from me, because I don't like the negative impact that it has on myself and other people. And then you humbly are asking God in step 7 to remove those shortcomings, right? After I've gotten serious with myself to that extent, now I can go into that 8th step and make that list of people that I owed amends to. And a lot of that information is coming out of my 4th step, relationships, right? And so I'm making this list. And then I'm covering it again with someone that is a confidant that I trust as a sponsor. And I'm saying, this is how I think I should make a direct amends. What do you think? Do you think I owe an amends or not? And they'd be like, yeah, you owe an amends. But it may not be direct. It may have to be a living amends, right? Especially if the person is dead. You are going to have a living amends. And so in step 9, I make that amends wherever possible, right? Except for when it might harm myself or others. And a sponsor can certainly help you with that. And by the time I get to step 10, now I'm talking about every day. I'm doing a step 10 in the evening, or whenever the course of my day is ending. Some people do it, they pay it backwards, right? The night ends and they wake up in the morning, they do their step 10, trying to figure out who they might need to be in touch with and promptly make amends. Like, I didn't mean to handle that this way, and I'm sorry if I offended you. Did I offend you? They'd be like, girl, no. Or they'd be like, oh, yeah, you did, right? And so as I'm moving into that, I'm free. I'm not carrying a lot of weight around from junk that I've done all day or all week to other people in the last year. I'm handling my affairs on a day-to-day basis. And through prayer and meditation, right? I'm maintaining conscious contact, meaning I'm staying in connection to my higher power, asking for his will, right? To a knowledge of his will, and asking for the power to be able to carry that out. That's where this is coming into play, because this particular reading is showing us that at some point in time, God's will for us becomes our own true will for ourselves. I've learned over a period of time that doing it my way did not work. It might have worked a little bit, but it didn't have the magnitude of good fruit from it that made me understand that this was God's will for me. Now I'm learning to only want that. My true will is God's will for me. That's what I've come to see. I don't want anything else. And the way that I'm able to check and balance is in that 11th step, maintaining that conscious contact and praying and asking through prayer and meditation, right? And then when I get into the 12th step, now I'm able to, having had a spiritual awakening, to carry this message to the addict that still suffers. Try to carry it is what it actually says, right? And to apply these spiritual principles in all my affairs. You know, the difference in a human being that is walking around weighted from shame or embarrassment or guilt or feeling bad over how they carried themselves the day before, the month before, the year before, compared to a person who is free on a daily basis. Today I had a couple of people I had to reach out to and say, I think something got lost in the context. Generally, when people that are always texting me every day, right? And then I respond and they don't respond, that tells me either they're not sure about how to respond, they could just be busy, or there's something in the way that I sent it that they're not sure about. And so I go back into my messages and I look and say, oh, I probably should have worded it this way. They probably got stuck in their feelings on that. And I'll reach back out. if you need some clarity, or this is what I meant by that, or I wish I hadn't said it like that, but this is exactly what I meant, right? So let's move on, right? Because now I have people in my life where error and how I might say something is not so weighty. Like, these people trust me and I trust them. So if our interaction, we're not perfect in how we describe things or say things or communicate, it's not going to end the relationship or the friendship. I find that people that are quick to draw lines and be done with you over simple miscommunication, 9 times out of 10, they were already done. They came to the table done with you. Or they came to the table only because they needed something, right? They weren't invested, because if they were invested, then their response would be different when there's a miscommunication, right? Not all that anger and tension and don't want anything to do with you. Those people are not invested in the relationship in the right way. Because the people that really love me and that I have a relationship with, it doesn't really matter like how bad we mess up. There's some things that you can't get away with, right? And messing with my kids is one of them, right? Bullying them. There's certain lines you can't cross. But in general, our relationship is so grounded in love that if there is a miscommunication or there's a misunderstanding, I'm not worried about that relationship ending because I messed up. You know how freeing that is to have people in your life that you cannot mess up too much with? And how freeing it is in your life to be able to have an open door with a person where you can go back to them and say, man, I said it like this, and that's not, if you did you take it like that, or are you upset with me? Those kind of people are people that you want to interact with and have in your life on a day-to-day basis, because life is not perfect and you will make mistakes. But if you're in a relationship with someone that you cannot make a mistake and make a comeback from, you haven't put your hands on them, you're not verbally abusive, physically abusive, or mentally abusive with, right? But you make a mistake in communication or how you handle something, and there's no comeback from that, they were never on your team anyway. There's no loss, right? And that's how I feel, right? And so in this spiritual awakening from the 12th step, I can apply these principles in all my affairs, but I don't do it perfectly. And having relationships with individuals allows you to be human, right? Can we just be a human being? Being meaning present, working it out, right? And that's what we want in our lives. We want to be able to also know that the relationships we have in our lives are a part of God's will for us. And one way of knowing that is whether or not you are dealing with a person that gives you room for error. And you don't take advantage of that, right? But gives you room for error, and you can always go back and make that right. And they're open to that. You know, I really am not a person that draws hard lines in the sand. I don't look at continual violations as an individual that I want to continue to deal with, because they're not taking me in consideration on a continual basis. So the dynamic of that particular relationship has to change, right? When I'm bringing to the table and what you're bringing to the table, they're not equal to begin with. And you think that you can continue to violate my personhood, either by words or deed, and you never say sorry. So if you are dealing with a person like that in the scope of this reading today, that may not be a relationship that is God's will for you. And you have to get to the point where your own true will is based on what God's will is for you, or based on what good orderly direction is for you. If it's not practical, it's not spiritual. And so that's what you're gonna, want to focus on. And I challenge you today to start looking at every interaction from that value point? Is this something that I'm in because it's just super convenient for me? Is it something they're in because it's super convenient? Or is this a give and take? Is this really a relationship or interaction or a business deal or whatever it is that is representative of God's will for you? And if you can honestly say no, it's just very lopsided and one-sided, I would challenge you to try to start distancing yourself from that. Because at the end of the day, it's going to bite you in the butt. If you can look at something and honestly, you can say that this is not a balanced, pleasant type of interaction that I believe is God's will for us to have the synergy together, to continue to pursue it is foolish at best. And over a period of time, you'll start to see the fruit of that, because you won't feel good, you won't feel happy, you won't feel that spirit of joy. There's some things that come with being in God's will, and joy and happiness, peace and patience, right? These are some fruits of that relationship. And if what you're doing is void of that, that's a good indication that you're not in the will of God. I wish you the best today. I hope that you have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful weekend. I'm going, and not weekend, but a beautiful week. It's Monday, and you have the whole week ahead of you to start setting things in alignment with God's will, because that should be your true will. You want it to be, because that's where you feel the grace, the ease, nothing's blocked. Like you can just move forward. You wake up and you know, yesterday was the most beautiful Sunday that I've had in a very long time. And I just want to say, even though it was challenging, there were some challenges in it, I was still able to see how God's will was in that day and how I was blessed as a result. And you want that. You want that in your life on a day-to-day basis. It's not that you're not going to have hard days. You are. But we weren't created to rot and be angry and fighting at every interaction. That's not who we're created to be. You know, I believe I'm created to have love and peace and happiness and joy, and the fruit of my hands, to be able to work and see the fruit of that and be able to provide for my family, right? I believe that that is my portion, and I think it is yours too, right? If we're in the rooms of recovery, and I know my first, I say 10 years kind of, haphazardly, but my first 7, 8 years in recovery were a joke. I was not recovering from anything except for I had put the drug down and I developed some more relationships, right? But a lot of those relationships had nothing to do with God's will. And I brought harm into my life as a result of just maintaining relationships that weren't meant to be maintained. I really didn't have an impartation or understanding of the spiritual principles, except for on a superficial religious level. I understood them from that point of view. But to be able to take those spiritual principles and put them in my life on a day-to-day basis, I was not there. I was not there, and I paid the price. I paid the price for having a desire to do things my way. And so I don't want that for you. So I challenge you today to start taking an inventory of the things that might glitter on the outside, but on the inside, they're trashy, right? All that glitters is not gold, right? We can have dressed up garbage cans in the form of business dealings, relationships, endeavors, ambitions. It can look good on the outside, but when you get into it, your insides feel like trash. Get rid of those things. Set a date. Like I know on Wednesday, every other Wednesday, my trash pickup is every Wednesday, but every other Wednesday I can put the recyclables out and the trash. And I try to fill my recyclables up with as much stuff that I know for a fact can be recycled. And then the stuff that can't be recycled, like a scooter, I put that in the trash, right? So you need to set a date for that stuff to go out on the curb to never be brought back to you again. Yeah. Enjoy your week. Take care.